Hey everyone, it's Frank. Just wanted to say a quick few words. Thank you so much for your support. Tim and I really appreciate all the good vibes and the kind words you've been sending us as we've gotten the new show off the ground. It's a ton of fun, and hopefully you enjoy it as much as we enjoy making it. Just wanted to say really quickly that we are obviously on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. Hopefully that's how you found us. If you wouldn't mind, just as you're listening to the show, take a quick second and leave us an iTunes review. Hopefully you enjoy the show enough to leave us a 4 or 5 star review. We'd super appreciate it if you could just take a second and do that. It'd mean a lot to us. Help us get the show out there, get the word out there. It'd be awesome. So thank you so much. Stay awesome and enjoy the show. Thank you.
Thought Bubble Audio.
Look, up in the sky.
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Welcome to Beer with Geeks with Tim and Frank.
Who are you?
I'm Batman.
I am Iron Man.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero.
My name is Inigo Montoya.
You're a wizard, Harry.
A couple of guys with a couple of beers and a whole lot of pop culture nostalgia.
Make it so, number one.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
I named the dog Indiana.
Life finds a way.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Now sit back and crack open a cold one, because it's time for Beer with Geeks.
It comes in paints? Shaken, not stirred.
Great Scott!
I was way off. I knew it started with an S, though.
Hi, and welcome to episode 3 of Beer with Geeks, the podcast where we reminisce about our geeky childhoods with our ungeeky beer. I'm Tim.
And I'm Frank.
And today we'll be discussing our very first comic book the first comic book we remember getting.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure the ones that I have in my head are not the first ones that I ever received.
You know, I know that mine is not the first that I received, but I don't remember what those were, so.
Yeah, I don't either. I have a vivid memory of a birthday randomly.
Yeah.
Okay. So these would actually be the first
Your very first
the first ones that I received. I remember waking up from my bed. It was up against the right back wall and the window was right over the bed. None of this is necessary information. Just so you know, I vividly remember it. And it was some birthday. I want to say it was 96. Maybe it was my 9th birthday, something like that. And my mom came into the room and she woke me up and she gave me birthday presents. And it was a Batman the Animated Series board game, which no one would play with me. So I've never played it.
Oh, sad
to this day. I know.
We can play it after this.
I don't have it anymore. I wish I did. I have no idea what happened to it.
Good, because I wasn't serious.
I know you weren't. And then... lies, I do have it. You're stuck now. No. And then so I had that, and then she gave me a bunch of comic books. And I really only remember a couple of them. I know there were a bunch, but 2 specifically. I remember it was an Adventures of Batman, and I believe it had the Penguin in it. Based on the animated series, the Bruce Timm one.
Yep.
And then I got a bunch of Spider-Man comics. A little did I know at this time, this is the infamous Clone Saga.
Oh, yes.
And so it's not Peter Parker as Spider-Man as seen on TV in the Fox television show.
Right.
It's Ben Reilly, his clone, who at this point they don't know which one's the clone and which one's Peter. Sure. They both, because they have the same exact memories, and so they're like, but am I the clone? So we have Peter, who, unbeknownst to everybody reading or known, it doesn't matter, he decides not to be Spider-Man. He's letting Ben be Spider-Man. He's got do you remember? He's got the variation on the costume where it's the big black spider with the arms
reaching over his shoulder. And
that costume, to this day, I love that costume. Cool. Actually, Marvel's doing some giant parallel universe Spider-Man crossover thing. And they're doing, it's going to be an ongoing or a mini, I'm not sure, but the cover is that Ben Reilly costume.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, I want to buy that book just because of that. Yeah. Well done, Marvel. Yeah. Well done. I'm mostly DC guy, but well done, Marvel.
Yeah.
Which is also interesting because the first comics I remember getting are Marvel.
Interesting.
They're not DC. I remember that Batman book, but the Spider-Man ones I remember getting, it was Spider-Man versus Dragon Man, with Spider-Man versus a Sentinel for some reason, which also had an appearance by the Green Goblin, but the good guy Green Goblin that happened in the 90s for a little while. It was like, who was it? It was somebody's, Ned Leeds' nephew, I think. No, or it's somebody's nephew who is now the current Hobgoblin, actually, who's now a bad guy. But at this time, he was like trying to be a good guy as the Green Goblin. And I remember being so captivated with that as a child and never seeing that character ever again except for that issue. But I remember that, and it was versus Mysterio, where he was like shrunken in a Toyland type thing, and so a bunch of stuff. I remember those. I vividly remember getting. Those were definitely my first ones. I'd have to go back and really look at the numbers, but they're not the ones that had the biggest emotional impact on me, I would say. So I'm not counting those as my first ones, if you will. Yep. So go ahead. What were yours? And I'll go back to the ones that actually resonated with me.
Okay, so I grew up, as both of us did, in actually like a pretty religious household.
You grew up?
I grew up as we both did. So I grew up in a religious household, and I remember that the first comic books I ever received were comics about the lives of the saints, but I don't remember who.
That is precious.
They were not very good.
Typically, Bible stories are not. Right. Bible stories as comics are typically awful.
So that's what they were. Yeah. I don't really remember. I think I honestly I don't remember what they were. So that's what my first comic books were. But
I did have an illustrated comic Bible, like all the way through. Okay, I do remember having that.
Yeah, this was. I don't think it was the Bible. It was like saints who came after the Bible. Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
at some point. Yeah. Probably not very good.
Not very good. Right.
If anything, killed it a little bit.
Probably. Yeah. So, but that's like in the very strictest sense of the word. Those were the first comics that I received. But they didn't have an impact on me. They didn't draw me into the medium at all. But I was always a big Superman fan as a kid.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I know. Completely new information.
Totally, not on my sleeve at all. Yeah, no, but it's I grew up watching George Reeves and watching the Fleischer cartoons and watching the Bruce Timm. Yes, and the Bruce Timm cartoons also. That was very, very big for me. So from the very beginning of that show all the way to the end. So Superman was always big for me, and I knew that I liked Superman as as a hero. And the Christopher Reeve movies, obviously, I can't ignore those.
Mm-hmm. I like Pink very much, Lois.
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, the line that resonated with most as a child.
The line about underwear.
Yeah, the line about underwear. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. So, I said you, not me. I was captivated by Marlon Brando's Rolex.
Call back.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah. But so the first time I read a comic book because I wanted to read a comic book was actually not until I was probably 16.
Oh my God.
15 or 16. Yeah, I was older by the time I really...
Why are we even doing the show? You're not a nerd. No, I'm just kidding.
Like, really, I was older before I was a nerd in other things, and I loved Star Wars, and I loved Star Trek, and I loved... watching all the superhero stuff in
Star
other
Wars
media.
And Star Trek aren't nerdy. Like, let's be serious.
Yeah,
like, get out.
So mainstream. So mainstream. But yeah, so I decided I had been to my local comic book shop a bunch of times with friends who were reading a lot of manga. Mm-hmm. And the guy behind the register could not stop raving about this book called Superman Red Son. And I was just like, I remember a couple episodes ago we were talking about when we were talking about Justice League. I said that I wasn't very accepting of things that were not like very strict, true to the story.
Yeah, Red Son is obviously a perfect retelling.
Right. So Red Son is under DC's old Elseworlds imprint, which was where they would just tell alternate reality stories. What if? What if this had happened? What if? And so the premise of Red Son is, what if Kal-El landed on Earth 12 hours later, and instead of landing in the United States, landed in Soviet Russia instead. When the Earth had turned, he lands in Soviet Russia instead.
It's awesome.
And it's
in Soviet Russia, Superman beats... I don't even know.
But yeah.
I'll come up with one as this goes on. Hold on. Give me time.
So, it's just that it turns the story on its head. He's the Soviet hero. He's He's there, instead of truth, justice, and the American way, it's like Marxism, socialism, and the expansion of the Warsaw Pact. It's
awesome.
It's such a interesting take on it, and you've got Batman, you've got Wonder Woman making appearances in it, you've got all Lex Luthor, Lois Lane, all the big characters are there. But it's in this Green Lantern. Yep.
Yeah.
You've got all these characters here, but it's where the Soviets have this super weapon during the Cold War that is Superman.
Nietzsche say Superman? Yeah. Yes. Oh yes.
Yeah. So that was my first it was the first graphic novel that I ever read. And
Mark Millar would be so happy.
Oh, I ate that up, and I was like, wait, but this is. I normally don't go for this stuff. I normally just want the very. Just cut and dried, I wanted the retelling of the story that I already know, and here I was really appreciating a story that was as far different as it could get.
And so really, Superman lobotomize you. Yeah. I knew I'd get one somewhere. Yeah. Oh man, I love that story. I'll never forget reading it, and I don't remember when I first read it. I was early still in my comics infancy. Well, regular reading comics infancy.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Because I started reading about when I was about 16.
Reading regularly.
16, 17, reading regularly.
Okay, yeah.
2000 Crisis on Infinite Crisis. Infinite Crisis, like 2005. Yeah. But I'll never forget reading Red Sun and the Batman's outfit, which is awesome.
So cool.
Soviet renegade,
yes.
Revolutionary awesome. And he's got the hat on, the wool hat.
The cowl is the wool hat.
Is the wool hat
with the ear flaps.
I love it now.
Yeah. Back then.
Then I was still in my like that first episode. I said very particular about the way Batman looks all the time, and so I remember reading that, and I just what is on his head? And then in the back of the book, I think there was an interview and they were like, why did you choose to have Batman wear a hat? And he was like, it's cold in Russia. Batman's human. He needs to wear a hat. It's cold out, and it's at night. And I was sold. Yeah. It's a reason. It's a reason I didn't even think of, because sometimes that doesn't dawn on you the same way. But that is a tremendous story and a
fantastic story.
Obviously, great way to start reading.
Yeah. And then a couple of years later, I jumped in, and very much a DC guy. I at your recommendation actually read Ultimate Spider-Man.
Yes.
But that wasn't the very next thing I read. Then when I really started reading comics, I jumped in. Still with Superman, Action Comics number 868, Jeff Johns, and it was during his Brainiac story.
Oh yeah, great.
And it's if you've seen the hardcover or the trade,
they do the ET phone home,
where it's Brainiac and Superman.
Yeah,
that's the cover of 868. It's that cover.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And so it's Brainiac Part 3. And it's just, that's where that was the first new issue I went to the store and picked up. I read most of Jeff Johns' run leading up to that, but the first one that I went to the comic book store as a caught up, ready to be part of the comic reading world nerd was, I will take Action Comics number 868, please. That was, paid my $2.99.
I wish I remembered the first book that I started reading, in continuity like that. I'm gonna go backwards in time.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Come back with me. Pull up a chair, even though you're already sitting down, and come back with me. I remember back in the day, the grocery store used to sell comic books.
That's right.
And actually, I think some still do,
but
now.
It's pretty rare now.
Yeah, actually, I was in a Walgreens, and they were selling Jeff Johns and John Romita Jr.'s New Superman.
No way, really?
I was like, no way.
Oh
I
my
almost
God.
bought it for the sake
just for the novelty of it.
The novelty of that is it's in a Walgreens, but no, it wasn't. That was in the magazine thing, but that would have been awesome. Yeah. The Shaws I used to go to used to sell comics at the register.
Yep.
And My mother was actually a comic reader when she was a kid.
Oh, really?
She grew up in the 50s, and so it was like super.
Yeah, kids read comics.
Well, it was popular then, but you're talking like Wortham era.
Yeah.
And so everything was like
Comics
super,
Code Authority was in full force.
Oh, yeah, you're talking like super low. But she was a Batman reader.
Oh,
and she actually gave them all away. And to this day, she's still like, original Barbies and Batman. She's like, no.
My dad collected Superman comics and baseball cards and gave them all away. When I started reading comics, even though he was like, you're going to start reading comics and you're like 17? Aren't you too old for that? Because it was a different,
It's a different. Yeah.
But I was like, do you have any of your old comics? Like, I would love to read your Silver Age, because he grew up in the 50s also. And he's like, I don't know. I mean, maybe. I don't think so. He found one issue of Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane.
Oh, no.
And I was like, Dad. And he was like, I mean, I read Superman.
It was logical sense to read Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane.
Right. It just...
Even then.
They were like
then.
10 cents or whatever.
Yeah.
It was just...
It's not funny that even then, like, cross multi-titles, and you're like, well, I already read Uncanny X-Men. I might as well also read Amazing X-Men and Adjectiveless X-Men and like Storm and Wolverine and all new X-Men. And
I imagine he read Superman in Action and probably Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen also, and
he read the 4.
Lois was in there too.
Yeah, 4 titles.
Yeah. Even then. But they didn't cross over back then. They would just be very episodic, just like one
and done.
The whole one and done for everything.
But those were the days. Although I don't really like one and done stories now.
Not anymore.
No, I don't. I have a tolerance for them. Even on television, I don't like episodic shows. Right. I just like, give me a story arc.
I like an arc. Yeah,
I like an arc.
But what were your?
So we were in the line, and the first comic, the first 2, because my brother and I shared really. And so, and by my brother and I shared, I mean we shared then, and then they just became mine when we got older. So now they're just mine.
Yeah.
But it was Heroes Reborn, Fantastic Four, number 6, art by Jim Lee. Which I don't know who Jim Lee is at this point, but apparently he was some superstar. Yeah. Who knew?
Up and coming young whippersnapper.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Jim Lee, even then was like one of the. He was. Oh yeah. He was a headliner. And so because this is after they relaunched X-Men number 1, Claremont and Jim Lee, and so the only exposure to the Fantastic Four that I had at this point was the cartoon, which was. First season of that show was very cartoonish. Second season, they tried to be a little bit more serious. They recolored their costumes and like all this, like they went in a different direction. But my exposure to... So I knew vaguely who some of the characters were when reading it, but you open up the first page and it's the Thing's girlfriend, blind girlfriend, Alicia. And she's like wondering where Ben is and whatever else. And then you flash to the next page, like instantly the next page, and it is a full splash page of the Super Skrull, who just looks like an unbelievable monster. I've never seen a Skrull before. I don't know what a Skrull looks like. You're like, what is a Super Skrull?
Yeah.
And this is like, I don't know what. It's like it's like not the first part of the story. It's like, so I'm jumping in halfway. And so you're going through, and the Silver Surfer is tied up in a thing, and Black Panther's there, and Doctor Doom is there, and like all this stuff. And then you're going later, and then Galactus shows up, and like we're talking about Galactus. And then at the end, and so they battle and whatever else. But at the very, very end, and this is what did it for me, was Doctor Doom goes into this secret room, and there's like some holographic image of the Hulk, okay, and he's got long hair and he's buck ass nude in the thing, and I'm just not incredibly captivated by buck ass nude the Hulk, like, don't get me wrong, like in the way that I'm saying this, but all of it tied together. I didn't necessarily understand what the story was going on, but I reread that issue over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and I couldn't even tell you how many times. Like, it's just I just stared at it for so long because it was so good looking. I
mean Jim Lee's artwork speaks for itself. You know, I mean it's
oh yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I mean, like, It's great.
Obviously. It's a given.
Yeah, it's a given. Man's a great artist. He's a great storyteller. But I don't, you know what I mean? My exposure before that was some of the books that I had read, that I got for my birthday, like I said before, and stuff like that. But I don't know who the artists were on those, even to this day.
Right.
But my real exposure to all of those stories, like to big artists, I had a graphic novel of Spider-Man versus the Green Goblin. And it just had a collection of different stories in it, like different milestones. Like, it didn't actually have his first appearance, which was odd, but it had his second appearance.
Goblin Salem, you're talking about?
Yeah, it had the Green Goblin's second appearance. When he actually had like a real goblin glider, because he originally just like rode like, it was like not a stick, it was supposed to be a broomstick, but it did not look that way. So I had that, and had the death of Gwen Stacy, and then the death of the Goblin, and like stuff like that. But it was like Steve Ditko, and then John Romita Sr.
Oh, wow.
And it had all these like big artists moving all the way up. I think it also had the issue where Harry gets high on drugs, and like the non-Comics Code Authority issue of Amazing Spider-Man. And then the issue where Harry dies when he's the Green Goblin, and all this stuff wrapped up. That was my exposure to the Green Goblin. To this day, is still one of my favorite villains, just because of that book. Like, it had the greatest, of course, like I read the greatest hits.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It would be like getting an album of the Beatles and like their number one, and be like, every song is amazing.
Yeah.
Every song is, some are amazing, some are not. Like, most are good. Yeah. And so, don't look at me like that. I know you love the Beatles, but not every song was amazing.
No, I know you think so.
Not every song was amazing.
I know you think so.
Yeah. Most of them were.
That's true.
Yeah, most were. They're amazing people. Anyway, getting off topic.
I said nothing.
You're just looking at me. Yeah, uncomfortable. Like, I just like I feel like I'm in the principal's office. Like, and then I was at the water bubbler for an extra 20 seconds because I didn't want to go back to class. But oh, okay. And now I'm just rambling because I don't want to go back to class. Green Goblin. Green Goblin. And so anyway, so I picked up this issue of Fantastic Four. My brother picked up Peter Parker Spider-Man number 75. Part 4 of 4 of Revelations, the end of the Clone Saga. Again, I've no
idea what's going on.
No idea what's going on, because 1, it's part 4 of 4. But 2, my only exposure to the Clone Saga were those few issues that I had of what was basically like, Spider-Man is in a different suit.
Yeah.
Like, this is a man named Ben. Like, I don't know. And so I picked up this issue in which Ben Reilly is kidnapped, and Spider-Man is now Spider-Man again, searching for him on Halloween. And MJ is in the hospital delivering their child. I want to talk about that in a second. Yeah. Okay. And then who steps out of the shadows? Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, resurrected from the dead for, I believe, the first time. This is the first time that he's come back, because it's a big deal. Because he rips off his shirt and he sees the big mark where the glider stabbed him when he died, and blah blah blah. John Romita Jr. Quite potentially, actually, is my favorite depiction of the Green Goblin to this day. It's just a gorgeous, scary looking thing. I'll pull it up later so you can see. But a scary looking beast of a man. And so they fight, and Goblin's like, you haven't seen the last of me? One of those, like, I'm potentially dead, but probably not endings. Right. And Ben Reilly crumples into dust, and Peter is like, I wasn't the clone. No. It's kind of he's sad that Ben is dying and diminished to all this thing, but he literally crumples to ashes in front of him, and he's like, I wasn't the clone. Now everything is solved. I know. And then he goes to see MJ, because she's delivering their baby, and he gets there, and she's like, I lost the baby. The end. And it's never been spoken of again, ever. The loss of their first child. Never. And now this is when they were married, before they got retconned,
right,
and whatever else. But it's funny to me because I love a good story, but those 2 books for me cemented that to me, the art is more important than the story for me. I can't read. I can, but it'll struggle. If I don't enjoy the art in a book, I will drop it. I have to enjoy the art more than the story. I can get by with a story that I think is middling as long as it looks awesome. But I can't. But I can't read a book if I don't like the art.
That is really interesting. I didn't realize that about you.
Yeah.
But that makes a lot of sense. And like obviously the art is so important when you're reading a comic book.
Potentially more important.
Potentially more important. For me, I think I put slightly more emphasis on the story. I'll suffer through bad art if the story grips me.
Interesting.
I'll notice it, but I'll put up with it.
Yep.
Being not so great art, as long as the story is strong enough to carry it. But I too have times where I'm just like, this is terrible. This is terrible. And luckily nowadays, at least with the two big publishers, the talent is great.
The pool is large.
Yeah.
There's still some people that show up and I go,
right.
But most of the time, it's not there. And it takes a lot for me to be like, I don't like your art style. Because I'm not picky. I'm not like, it only needs to look like this.
Right.
I will only take books that look like George Perez.
Right.
I don't, that's not my thing. I can usually find something redeeming in all of it, even if it's not my taste. But there are some I just like, if I can't tell what's going on or I don't like it, I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'm gone. But I think that's just my eye from the early days. Even reading the Ditko stories, it wasn't I love Stan Lee, but it was not Stan Lee's script that drew me into the first Spider-Man story.
That's true.
It was Ditko's art.
Yeah.
And so it's just, if I want to read a book, I'll read a book. If I want to read a comic, I want to look at the pretty pictures. That's just yeah. And so but yeah, anyway, so that was my first those are my first. Actually, the Spider-Man versus Green Goblin graphic novel thing, the collection that I had, was actually, when I was younger, torn apart by my cat.
Oh, really?
One of the cats we had growing up, and like tore apart the front cover, like it was like literally pulled it off the shelf and like started tearing it to pieces.
Oh my god!
And so a couple of years ago, maybe just as little as last year, I went on Amazon and I was like, I gotta get a recut. I have to re-get, and I found it cheap. Like somebody was selling it, and now it's like pristine, it was like just printed, because I just love that collection so much. Even the cover is just, I love it.
And I bet it's one of your prized possessions now.
It is. I should probably not have told you about it. You thief. I was calling you a necrophiliac. I meant kleptomaniac, not like, you thief. You necrophiliac.
I mean,
what do you think? You're the Hunchback of Notre Dame or something?
I wasn't supposed to say that on the podcast.
I wasn't supposed to say that out loud. Yeah, for the record, I know you're not.
So that's interesting that your first, like the books that you found the most influential in your early comic book reading life were Marvel, and you're
now I'm a DC guy.
You're more of a DC guy. I mean, you have a big Marvel collection still, but
I do have a big Marvel collection. It does not rival the DC collection,
but it's still fairly large.
It's still fairly large. I have a huge collection, just so everybody knows.
He's got giant shelves full of trades that actually rival.
I rival some comic stores. Yeah, I definitely rival some bookstores, but I could even rival comic store here
and the trades. Yeah,
I have a tremendous amount.
Yeah, just giant shelves full of trades from multiple publishers, but. What I'm getting at is you're more of a DC guy.
Yeah, now I am. Yeah. Well, this I can tell you. That I can tell you why, and I have two reasons for that. The first is I grew up watching Adam West. I grew up watching George Reeve to a lesser extent, but I still grew up watching him. Not Super Friends, but I grew up watching the Filmation things where, do you know what I'm talking about?
Isn't that Super Friends?
No, it was The Adventures of Batman and Robin. The Adventures of Superman.
Superman Batman Adventure Hour or whatever they called it. Where it was like
not the WB one in like the 90s.
No, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about.
The Filmation one that was like a super.
That's the one.
The Superman one and then a Batman.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I grew up watching that too. There was a Rentals at Blockbuster that we used to take all the time.
Sure.
And so I took the Batman Home one more often than not. But I mean, like, my very first birthday cake that I remember was a Superman cake. It was like, it was awesome. And there's a picture of it somewhere too. And so I think that's been ingrained in me from that standpoint, where those are my first, and it just happened to be Marvel that kind of passed my way on television or in the books or whatever that case may be. But when I started reading in 2005, it's because I had a friend, or I still have a friend, he's still alive, who was reading weekly, and we worked together, and he used to come in on Thursdays or whatever, or sometimes Wednesday night, and be like, oh, this is happening, so on and so forth. And so I would ask questions, because I knew the characters, and we all, where we worked, I used to work at Blockbuster, so it was like we were all like movie fans, TV, comic, like we all liked the same things. And so he was like the weekly reader, and so I would ask questions and this and that, and then he started bringing in the books, and then he started letting me take the books home. It's like the best salesman ever. But I remember one day specifically, he came in and he was like, Wonder Woman killed Maxwell Lord. She snapped his neck. And I remember going, who's Maxwell Lord? But I was enraptured by the fact that Wonder Woman killed somebody, because that's a comics no-no, or was a comics no-no. You know, now they all kill. Right. You know.
But at least for the big three, the Trinity.
For the Trinity, kill somebody. That was a big deal. And it was a big deal in the books, too. That was she was shunned, and that led into Infinite Crisis, and directly into Infinite Crisis, actually. Yep. And that's really what made me... I have those issues, actually, that he gave me. So, technically... I do have, actually, I'm going to go back. I do have the issues when I started reading full time, because I have those issues of the fight between Wonder Woman and Superman when she killed Maxwell Lord and blah, blah, blah. So that was actually why I'm a DC guy, I think, more. Just because that was he's a big DC guy, he's not so much a Marvel guy. And so my exposure ran in that direction. But apart from the Spider-Man show on Fox and the X-Men show, that was really my only exposure to Marvel. It was the cartoons. Like, there was the Iron Man cartoon and the Hulk cartoon and blah, blah, blah. But it didn't really go beyond that. And then he came in with the DC stuff and kind of zipped it there. And I, already being a huge Batman fan right from the get-go, I grew up watching the 89 Batman film again and again and again and again. The Adam West film again and again and again and again. I distinctly remember not being allowed to see Batman Returns when it came out in the theater.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But anyway, so I think that's how I ended up a DC guy.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. I mean, similar to me, being such a big Superman fan from really like age 3. I also remember having a birthday cake that was. Had an entire birthday the tablecloth, the wrapping papers, everything was Superman.
That's
the cake was Superman, everything was Superman. And
you were Superman.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Yeah, and that's how Frank broke his legs and is now a paraplegic.
Sad but true.
Yeah,
that was offensive.
But I feel like that's because I was a Superman fan. I was inclined towards kind of like, well, who's Superman's friends? Oh, Batman. Oh, Wonder Woman. Oh, the Green Lantern. Oh, like that's it branched out from there, you know.
Who are his super friends?
Right. It's like well, I want to see. It's like I like superheroes and like other stories. Oh, and that hero happens to be friends with Superman. Cool. Then I'll read that. I'll look at that story too. So it kind of naturally progressed from there. And I liked Spider-Man a lot too. Growing up, I watched like some of the Fox series a little bit and some other cartoon series of Spider-Man, but he didn't really cross over a lot with the other heroes, so I didn't find myself branching out and being like Iron Man and Captain
America and Hulk and the X-Men and She-Hulk and
he didn't cross over with the X-Men or the Avengers really at that time or in those shows.
Yeah, right.
Or at least the episodes I was watching. So I liked Spider-Man on his own.
Yeah, he really didn't. Towards the later end of that show,
but I never saw those.
Oh, you saw the early episodes.
Yeah. I saw isolated episodes. I wasn't watching regularly. So I knew I liked Spider-Man. And then I knew I liked Superman, and I just happened to see things where he was crossing over with other heroes, like in the Superman animated series, and that's how I became a DC guy. I have an attraction to those characters because I remember those from growing up.
That's interesting. That's interesting. That's probably why even now, like when we go see these films and whatever else, I get excited about the Marvel films, but the ones that I have an attachment to in my childhood, I have much better. Like, yeah, I guess so. It all boils down to those television shows. Because even
for me, it does.
I had tapes growing up of the older shows, like the Captain America Filmation-y type, when
Captain America throws his mighty shield.
I sing that more often than not. That's the sad part. Yeah, walking down the street, strut like a man.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah. So I think we can leave it there for now.
So.
Any final comments?
Closing remarks. Just that. I think comics are becoming more and more an adult medium, and I'm very interested to see where the future generations, where they're going to get that from. Is it going to be these Marvel movies that have been coming out? Maybe that'll be what fuels them, and then when they get to be this age, they'll be reading comics. I don't know.
It's actually, it's funny that you say that, because I am struggling to find books for age appropriate for kids to read. It is a huge challenge because all of a sudden, because you're reading, not that I am a parent, but I'm reading with parent eyes almost. Yeah. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, that's not good. You can't do that. And that's not good. And that's not good. And that's not good. And all of a sudden you're like, here's Charlie Brown.
Right.
And
you're left with,
not that I don't love Charlie Brown, but it's not what I'm looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So who knows, actually? Who knows where it'll end up? But I don't know. As long as it doesn't die.
It never will. It never will.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that line from The Sandlot. Like, what did it say? Heroes are remembered, kid, but legends never die.
That's it.
Remember that. Yeah.
And on that note, thanks for tuning in to Beer with Geeks, and we'll see you next time, guys.
Right. Cheers.
Cheers.
This podcast is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. All character names, sound effects, and quotes are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Thought Bubble Audio Studios unless otherwise indicated.